In the deep reaches of the North Atlantic, beneath thousands of feet of unforgiving ocean, a mystery unfolded that has haunted the US Navy for decades. It was the spring of 1968 when the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered submarine and Cold War veteran, vanished during her homeward journey from a Mediterranean deployment. What began as a standard return across friendly waters would become one of the most perplexing submarine losses in American naval history, marked by strange signals and scattered theories. For Maritime Mishaps, this is a deep dive into the final mission of the USS Scorpion, a tale of Cold War tension, submerged secrets, and the unanswered questions still lingering over 100 leagues under the sea. The USS Scorpion, a skipjack-class nuclear submarine, began her life in the late 1950s during a period of intense Cold War naval deployment. Her keel was laid on August 20th, 1958, at the General Dynamics Electric Boat Facility in Groton, Connecticut. She was launched on December 19th, 1959, and ceremonially sponsored by Elizabeth S. Morrison, the daughter of Lieutenant Commander Maximilian Schmidt, who had commanded a previous submarine of the same name, lost during World War II. The Scorpion officially entered service on July 29, 1960, under the command of Commander Norman B. Bessack. Shortly after commissioning, the submarine was assigned to Submarine Squadron 6, Division 62. Her early missions included a 2-month deployment to European waters, where she participated in joint training with NATO allies and the US 6th Fleet. Upon returning to New England in late October 1960, the Scorpion spent several months conducting exercises along the US East Coast before relocating to Norfolk, Virginia, in September of 1961. Norfolk would remain her home port for the remainder of her service. In recognition of her operational excellence, she received a Navy Unit Commendation in 1962. Over the next several years, the Scorpion played a pivotal role in advancing nuclear submarine warfare tactics. Operating as both aggressor and target in various exercises, she conducted missions along the Atlantic seaboard, in waters near Bermuda and around Puerto Rico. From mid-1963 to mid-1964, she underwent a scheduled overhaul in Charleston, South Carolina. After returning to service, she resumed patrols, including 2 notable transatlantic surveillance missions in both 1964 and 1965. Then, in 1966, she was tasked with sensitive operations. Reportedly, this included a clandestine mission in which her crew observed and filmed a Soviet missile launch during a risky maneuver into Russian inland sea. In February 1967, the Scorpion returned to Norfolk Naval Shipyard for what was intended to be a full overhaul, including a nuclear reactor refueling. However, in the wake of the disaster of the USS Thresher and the launch of the Navy's Sub-Safe Safety Initiative, the maintenance needs of the submarine fleet dramatically increased. Due to limited resources and high demand for operational submarines, the Scorpion's overhaul was significantly reduced in scope. Much of the crucial sub-safe work, including installation of updated safety systems, was postponed. This included upgrades to the emergency main ballast tank blow system, this being a key mechanism for rapid surfacing. As a whole, the overhaul itself became infamous for being the least expensive and the shortest among nuclear submarines at the time, reportedly costing just over $3 million, well below the norm. This was the first sign of pending trouble. In late 1967, following the reduced overhaul, the Scorpion returned to duty anyway. A new commanding officer, Commander Francis Slattery, took over as the submarine resumed weapons systems testing and refresher training. After final preparations, she departed Norfolk on February 15, 1968, for another Mediterranean deployment with the US 6th Fleet. Throughout this final mission, the Scorpion experienced several technical issues, including persistent freon leaks in the refrigeration system and an electrical fire caused by water in a power conduit. Although there was no official speed restrictions documented, the submarine was voluntarily observing a conservative depth limit of 500 feet. As her deployment grew to a close in May 1968, the Scorpion stopped at Naval Station Rota in Spain, where 2 crew members disembarked, one due to a family emergency and the other for medical reasons. There are some sources which suggest that the Scorpion was actually assisting in providing acoustic cover for a US ballistic missile submarine which was departing from Rota, and being shadowed by Soviet surveillance submarines and intelligence gathering vessels. One way or another, it all seems suspicious. Following this rendezvous, the Scorpion was tasked with monitoring Soviet naval activity in the mid-Atlantic, particularly near the Azores. Reports indicate that a Soviet Echo 2 class submarine and a guided missile destroyer were part of the information she was observing. After completing her surveillance duties, the Scorpion began her return voyage to Norfolk. Tragically, however, she would never arrive. In the final days leading up to her disappearance, the USS Scorpion attempted to communicate with US Naval Command. Beginning late on the night of May 20th, 1968, and extending into the early hours of May 21st, the submarine made several efforts to contact Naval Station Rota in Spain. Despite repeated attempts, she was only able to establish contact with the US Navy communications station in Greece. That station relayed the messages to Submarine Force Atlantic Command. The aforementioned last known transmission from Commander Francis Slattery reported that the Scorpion was closing in on a group of Soviet naval vessels, including a submarine and research ships, while maintaining a speed of 15 knots and a depth of 350 feet. She was preparing to begin surveillance operations. Initially, it was not common for submarines on submerged operations to maintain radio silence for extended periods. However, after several hours with no contact, the Atlantic Fleet initiated an extensive search effort beginning on May 28th. This search rapidly expanded to include 55 ships and 35 aircraft at its peak between May 28th and May 30th. Command of the search operation fell to Vice Admiral Arnold F. Schrader, commander of the Submarine Forces Atlantic Fleet, with Rear Admiral Lawrence G. Bernard overseeing operations at sea aboard the guided missile frigate USS Stanley. The search effort involved not only US Navy units, but also aircraft and support from the Air Force, Coast Guard, and Canadian forces. These included long-range maritime patrol aircraft such as the P-2 Neptunes, P-3 Orions, S-2 Trackers, and the C-130 Hercules transports. On the night of May 29th, a brief radio message containing the Scorpion's codename, Brandywine, was received by a search aircraft, the submarine Lapon, and 6 surface vessels. While this raised hope, the origin of the message could not be pinpointed. Although a bearing was triangulated, it proved inconclusive. It was also noted that Brandywine was also the name of several civilian vessels operating in the Atlantic at the time, leaving open the possibility that that message had originated from somewhere else. The initial search area spanned both sides of the continental shelf along the eastern seaboard and extended eastward along the submarine's projected return course. Despite exhaustive coverage, no conclusive signs of the Scorpion were found. Several small items, such as buoys and oil cans, were spotted by search units, but later determined not to be related to the missing submarine. 2 underwater wrecks, one near Cape Henry, Virginia, and another off Cape Charles, were examined by the submarine rescue ship Sunbird. Both of them were ruled out, having been identified as World War II-era submarine and an old merchant vessel respectively. As the search pressed on, the US Navy deployed the research ship USNS Mizar, which departed Norfolk on June 2nd to assist in locating the wreck. The Mizar was outfitted with deep-sea search equipment and targeted areas near the cruiser and Irving Banks, south of the Azores. On June 9th, she was scheduled to begin using her gear in the designated area. To support any possible salvage efforts, deep-sea divers and an advanced diving system were flown into the Azores and loaded onto the salvage ships Preserver and Hoist. These vessels were prepared to assist if the search area could be narrowed down to a specific location. Other international assistance also joined the operation. On June 2nd, the French submarine Requin arrived in the search zone near the Marsala Bank, approximately 400 miles southwest of the Azores, to aid the American forces. By June 3rd, the search force consisted of 22 ships and 27 aircraft, with a significant portion made up of US submarines and 5 destroyers, operating along the Scorpion's projected track, moving eastward from Norfolk. As the effort continued, regular updates were sent to both command units and to media outlets, though no confirmed sightings or discovery had yet occurred. Both the ship and its crew were officially presumed gone as soon as June 5th. In October 1968, the wreck of the USS Scorpion was located by USNS Mizar, resting nearly 10,000 feet below the surface, southwest of the Azores. The discovery followed the release of SOSUS underwater recordings that had captured the submarine's destruction. Experts, including acoustics specialist Gordon Hamilton, who had detected the implosion from a listening station in the Canary Islands, and Naval Research Lab scientist Chester Buchanan, who used a camera sled to confirm the location, played key roles in the successful search. Additional deep-sea missions, including dives by Trieste II, were launched to gather imagery and to analyze the site. Investigations revealed that the Scorpion had likely suffered a catastrophic implosion after passing below its crush depth. The operations compartment collapsed first, followed by the failure of a structural transition point in the hull, breaking the submarine in two. The engine room telescoped forwards and the sail was torn from the hull. Although the torpedo room remained mostly intact, a missing escape hatch indicated the violent effect of the pressure. The damage pattern suggests that the vessel may have been intact and under power before a sudden failure led to its destruction. After breaking apart, the submarine's remains continued to fall for nearly 2 miles deeper into the Atlantic. The 99 sailors who were aboard were all lost, presumably still trapped inside. At least, that's what some experts believe, although others weren't so sure there wasn't more to this story. The loss of the USS Scorpion has been the subject of speculation, debate, and controversy for decades, with multiple competing theories attempting to explain the mysterious sinking of the nuclear-powered submarine in the late May of 1968. Among the most widely discussed explanations is the possibility of a hydrogen gas explosion triggered during battery charging. Retired IUSS acoustics expert Bruce Rule and former Rear Admiral Dave Oliver both suggested that a buildup of hydrogen may have ignited, resulting in 2 small explosions. This would likely have been due to changes in the submarine's ventilation as it ascended to periscope depth. These blasts were captured by undersea hydrophones and occurred just half a second apart. The idea here is that the initial hydrogen blast didn't destroy the pressure hull, but instead killed key crew members, disabled critical systems, and ultimately left the submarine helpless as it slowly descended past its crush depth. Another theory centers around a possible malfunction involving the Mark 37 torpedo. In the Navy's own 1993 release of its previously classified Court of Inquiry report, several scenarios including the torpedo were ranked among the most plausible. These included an accidental or spontaneous activation of the weapon, or even a misfire triggered by stray electrical current. One theory suggests a torpedo could have hot run inside its tube, igniting and arming itself unintentionally, and then homed in on the Scorpion after being released. This possibility gained traction through the writings of John Craven, former chief scientist of the Navy's Special Projects Office, who initially believed that the Scorpion was struck by one of its own torpedoes. Later into his career, however, Craven modified his stance, entertaining the notion that a fire in the torpedo room sparked by an overheating Mark 46 battery might have caused a low-level explosion, enough to open the sub's torpedo loading hatch and trigger catastrophic flooding. Adding to the pile of possibilities are theories involving mechanical failure and structural weaknesses. Photographs of the wreck show the submarine shaft and propeller detached, with one rotor blade missing, raising questions about whether a mechanical failure led to uncontrollable flooding. Vice Admiral Arnold Schrader, testifying during the original inquiry, speculated that a malfunction in the trash disposal unit may have allowed seawater to enter the submarine while it was at periscope depth, leading to a fatal chain of failures. There is also darker theories suggesting sabotage or attack. There are books such as All Hands Down and Scorpion Down, which propose that the Scorpion was deliberately sunk by a Soviet submarine. According to these accounts, the Scorpion had been diverted from her original return course to investigate a Soviet naval group, possibly already aggravated by recent US submarine operations. Some believe that, aided by the KGB spy ring led by John Walker, Soviet forces knew the Scorpion was en route and intercepted it. These claims often cite the unusually aggressive posture of the Soviet submarines during that era, and suspicious Cold War incidents such as deliberate undersea collisions and harassment of NATO vessels. Despite years of investigation, the US Navy has never issued a definitive explanation. Its various inquiries have ultimately left the cause listed as inconclusive, though Craven's torpedo-related theories are prominently included in the official findings of fact. The Navy's final conclusion stated only that a sudden and devastating event had occurred, causing flooding in the forward compartments. Whether that was caused by mechanical failure, torpedo detonation, or hostile action remains unanswered. The wreck of the USS Scorpion lies nearly 10,000 feet below the surface of the North Atlantic, roughly 400 nautical miles southwest of the Azores, resting silently on the sandy floor of the Sargasso Sea. Since its discovery, the US Navy has periodically returned to the site to assess potential environmental risks and to ensure that the wreck remains undisturbed, particularly due to the presence of the submarine's nuclear reactor and the 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. Although the Navy has conducted classified surveys, only a few images have been released, most notably those taken by oceanographer Robert Ballard in 1985 during a covert mission using the submersible Alvin, part of a deal that later led to the discovery of the Titanic. Official Navy reports assert that no dangerous radiation has been detected, and that the submarine's reactor and warheads remain intact, with any corroded nuclear material presumed to have settled harmlessly into the sediment. Despite this, curiosity in the public eye has remained high, and in 2012, the US Submarine Veterans Organization petitioned for the investigation into the Scorpion sinking to be reopened. The Navy, however, denied this petition, further fueling speculation that not all the answers surrounding the submarine's mysterious loss have been brought to light. For some, the ambiguity in their answers only deepens their suspicion. In the meantime, we will continue to honor the memory of those men who lost their lives in the tragic sinking of the USS Scorpion, and pray that such a disaster never again occurs.